Let's start with the basics. Being human, being together in this world, loving and liking, disliking and hating. It's complicated. As Anne Lamott reminds us, I used to think that paired opposites were a given, that love was the opposite of hate, right the opposite of wrong. But now I think we sometimes buy into these concepts because it is so much easier to embrace absolutes than to suffer reality. I don't think anything is the opposite of love. Reality is unforgivingly complex.
But Adrienne Rich also reminds us that we must embrace that complexity. An honorable human relationship, she writes, that is one in which two people have the right to use the word love, is a process, delicate, violent, often terrifying to both persons involved, a process of refining the truths they can tell each other. It is important to do this because it breaks down human self-delusion and isolation. It is important to do this because in doing so, we do justice to our own complexity. It is important to do this because we can count on so few people to go that hard way with us. I'm not so sure Rich is right about that last line, that we can count on so few people to travel with us. But for them to travel with us, we have to be willing to do the work to travel with them.
And that work, Marge Piercy writes in her poem, To Have Without Holding, is hard sometimes. Learning to love differently is hard. Love with the hands wide open. Love with the doors banging on their hinges. The cupboard unlocked. The wind roaring and whimpering in the rooms. Rustling the sheets and snapping the blinds that thwack like rubber bands in an open palm.
It hurts to love wide open, stretching the muscles that feel as if they are made of wet plaster, then of blunt knives, then of sharp knives.
It hurts to thwart the reflexes of grab, of clutch, to love and let go again and again. It pesters to remember the lover who is not in the bed, to hold back what is owed to the work that gutters like a candle in a cave without air, to love consciously, conscientiously, concretely, constructively.
I can't do it, you say. It's killing me. But you thrive. You glow. On the street, like a neon raspberry, you float and sail a helium balloon, bright bachelor's button blue and bobbing on the cold and hot winds of our breath, as we make and unmake, in passionate diastole and systole, the rhythm of our unbound bonding, to have and not to hold, to love with minimized malice, hunger and anger, moment by moment, balanced.
What is this love thing anyway? Neil Gaiman wonders in his poem, Adventures in the Dream Trade. How do we know we feel it, or are in it, or are living it? I don't think that I've been in love as such, although I liked a few folk pretty well. Love must be vaster than my smiles or touch, for brave men died and empires rose and fell. For love, girls follow boys to foreign lands, and men have followed women into hell. In plays and poems, someone understands that there's something makes us more than blood and bone, and more than biological demands. For me, love's like the wind, unseen, unknown. I see the trees are bending where it's been. I know that it leaves wreckage where it's blown. I really don't know what I love you means. I think it means, don't leave me here alone.
Had me a cowboy, weren't much to look at, just a free rambling man. But that was such a long time, no matter how I tried. The years, they just roll by like a broken down dam. Make me an angel that flies from Montgomery. Make me a poster of an old rodeo. Just give me one thing that I can hold on to believe in this living is such a hard way to go. There's flies in the kitchen, I can hear them there buzzing, and I ain't done nothing since I woke up today.
How the hell can a person go to work in the morning, come home in the evening, and have nothing to say?
Make me an angel that flies from Montgomery. Make me a poster of an old rodeo. Just give me one thing that I can hold on to believe in this living is such a hard way to go. To believe in this living is such a hard way to go.
To believe in this living is such a hard thing to do. To believe in love's gifts can be a hard thing because we know that love sometimes breaks us. But that, as a character in John Green's Paper Towns realizes, might be the point. Maybe it's like you said before, all of us being cracked open. Like each of us starts out as a watertight vessel, and then things happen. These people leave us, or don't love us, or don't get us, or we don't get them, and we lose and fail and hurt one another. And the vessel starts to crack in places. And I mean, once the vessel cracks open, the end becomes inevitable. Once it starts to rain inside the osprey, it will never be remodeled. But there is all the time between when the cracks start to open up and when we finally fall apart. And it's only that time that we see one another, because we see out of ourselves through our cracks and into others through theirs. When did we see each other face to face? Not until you saw into my cracks and I saw into yours. Before that, we were just looking at ideas of each other, like looking at your window shade, but never seeing inside. But once the vessel cracks, the light can get in. The light can get out.
Maybe what makes love so complicated, other than, people, is that we ask too much of that light shining through those cracks. We try to grasp it, to shape it, to bend it to our expectations, our demands. Light doesn't work that way. And neither, wrote Anne Morrow Lindbergh, should we expect love to. When you love someone, she wrote, you do not love them all the time, in exactly the same way from moment to moment. It is an impossibility. It is a lie to even pretend to. And yet this is exactly what most of us demand. We have so little faith in the ebb and flow of life, of love, of relationships. We leap at the flow of the tide and resist in terror its ebb. We are afraid it will never return. We insist on permanency, on duration, on continuity, when the only continuity possible in life as in love is in growth, in fluidity, in freedom, in the sense that the dancers are free, barely touching as they pass, but partners in the same pattern. The only real security is not in owning or possessing, not in demanding or expecting, not in hoping even. Security in a relationship lies neither in looking back to what was in nostalgia, nor forward to what it might be in dread or anticipation, but living in the present relationship and accepting it as it is now.
If you had asked me a month ago to sing the theme song to the X-Men cartoon from the mid-90s, and I don't know why you would, there's no way I could have. I couldn't have remembered it to save my life. But when Chad and I recently watched the newly released updated version of the X-Men cartoon that featured the same theme song from the original 90s series, I got chills. Chad and I both teared up and grabbed each other's hands.
I admit nothing.
Turns out I did remember that song. Do 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 do. It was buried in my bones, and hearing it unlocked that memory. More than a memory, I was transported back in time almost 30 years to the dumpy but beloved little house Chad and I rented in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. "That's our courting song," Chad said. Well, he amended, we were already shacking up by then. Nostalgia aside, this moment made me realize that we're not the young geeks in love that we once were, and yet we are. It made me ponder how each individual is actually a plurality of people, not just across time, but at any moment in time. Or at least that's how I'm going to craft this little anecdote as I think about our monthly worship theme of pluralism and our service theme today of love, and think about how I can connect the two. Certainly, there's value in loving pluralism, or loving different things and different people in different ways. But I find it most interesting, at least right now, to think about loving the plurality of the same person or thing, to acknowledge, and maybe even accept and embrace, that there are aspects to every person that we will never fully understand or know or like. This plurality applies to everything, from the natural world to our jobs and our church communities. And not only is everything a plurality right here, right now, every person and thing is constantly changing. Of course, that includes us. Each one of us is a big old mess of complexity. To quote Walt Whitman, and yeah, I can quote Walt Whitman and reference the X-Men in the same piece, that's pluralism. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. So we're all a pluralistic multitude, and loving anyone or anything means we're loving a multitude. So what? As Chad and I often ask ourselves and each other, how does this little nugget of wisdom change how we move in the world? On an interpersonal level, thinking about plurality and love might make me more compassionate and curious about others and myself. It might make me more present and appreciative. Instead of just getting annoyed that someone gives me unsolicited tips about doing strength training, I can recognize that someone is both a nagging self-appointed personal trainer and a loving spouse who wants me to be as healthy as I can be so I can be around as long as possible to watch superhero cartoons with him.
That guy sounds awesome.
John Keats made it sound prettier. I am profoundly enchanted by the flowing complexity in you. And that makes me realize there are a plurality of ways to love and be loved. We can love boldly and quietly, with ways that delight and annoy each other. It's popular to talk about the 5 love languages, but I think there are more like 5,000. No wonder things so often get lost in translation. It also makes me appreciate how fleeting and mysterious every moment of love is. Our messy multitudes will never come together in quite the same way ever again. I don't even think the X-Men or any superhero could make that happen, no matter how awesome their theme song.
Hard Times Require Furious Dancing by Alice Walker. Loving humans means writing poems and songs, novels and plays, slogans, chants, and protest signs. Our critics want to stone us For while we think of them as people, under different circumstances, we might be able to help.
How we say I love you. My family loves me, and I love them, but we don't use words to say I love you. Instead, my mom stirs her love into a pot of steaming zifan. A chorus of Zawan Hana welcomes me to the table, and we start the day together, our bellies and hearts full. Agong shows me the love he feels when he walks me to school. As I hop over cracks, his steps shuffle next to mine, and we dance to the rhythm of our feet. How do I show my family my love? I do my best at school so they can feel proud. When the teacher asks a question, I raise my hand. And at recess, I run as fast as I can. As I catch my breath, I imagine how bright their eyes will shine when I tell them how hard I tried. My tummy rumbles. I find Ama's gan mian steaming inside my lunch. She sprinkles her love onto the noodles she makes for me. And sometimes I find a sweet surprise, too. At the game, my dad's love echoes in his cheers. Jia Yu, Hana, go, go, go. My legs pump faster and faster. I miss. As I sniff by the sidelines, my dad holds my hands and whispers in my ear. With his every word, my bravery grows, and I dash back onto the field to try again. The moment I get home, I run to find the rest of my family. Stories from our day spill from our lips, and we settle into the sweetness of being together again. Then, as the smell of dinner fills our home, I rest my head on the belly that holds someone precious and new. I tell it about things like ice cream and swings and rain, and the love that's waiting when it joins us. Dad calls us to the table. Chi-Fan Li, we show Ama and Agong our love when we let them fill their bowls first. They pick the best pieces that will keep them strong. Yet those pieces often end up in my bowl. Finally, as night takes over day, we say, I love you with the last things we do. I rub the knots out of Ama's feet and pour Agong the tea that helps him sleep. While my dad and I read side by side, my mom tucks my sheets in tight. With their goodnight kisses that's still soft against my cheek, I whisper a last, Wanan. In my family, our love lives in all the things we do for one another. That is how we say, I love you.
Part of my call or path to ministry has been to wonder on and off, mostly on, what does it mean to be a religious person? To be a person of faith? I mean, the fact that I started asking that question probably moved me several steps along on that road to finally enrolling in seminary. I've been studying in a couple of classes Islam and the Quran. And the Quran is infused in the daily life of traditional, that is to say, most Muslims. It is, writes the scholar Syed Hossein Nasr, the constant companion of Muslims in the journey of life. The first sounds recited into the ear of a newborn child, and its verses are usually the last words that a Muslim hears upon the approach of death. Nasr describes the way that the sound of its recitation, and the Quran translates as the recitation. It is, for Muslims, the verbatim word of God. It is not the Quran in any language other than Arabic. And Nasr describes the way the sound of its recitation can nearly always be heard in Islamic cities and towns, and how every act that is legitimate in the eyes of God is preceded by the very words that open the Quran. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. The Quran embodies the Islamic faith, and it is never far from Muslims' hearts, minds, or actions. As Nasr writes, the Quran is present in the soul and mind of believers during every moment of life. Whether one is engaged in lovemaking, fighting a battle in the middle of a war, or busy in economic activity, no matter how much one writes about the role of Quran in Muslim life, it is impossible to exhaust the subject, for the Quran affects every aspect of a Muslim's existence, from the body to the psyche and the inner faculties to the mind, the intellect, and the spirit. When I read Nasr, I found myself wondering, what would it look like for Unitarian Universalists, for me, to practice a faith that is as integrated into and inseparable from our lives as the Quran is for traditional Muslims? Honestly, it isn't that easy for me to envision. We UUs are quick, sometimes a bit too quick in my not entirely humble opinion, to point out that we do not have a shared creed. Most of us do not believe in a God, and those who do have wildly different understandings of who that God is. Frankly, those of us who don't believe in God have wildly different understandings of who that God is. And the different ideas of what role God plays in the world and in our lives. Even those of us who are self-described humanists don't share the same understanding of what humanism is. We are not an agreeable people. Our canon is wide open. There is no shared sacred text like the Quran. I mean, many of us get squeamish just hearing the word sacred. And all of this makes it challenging for Unitarian Universalists to define quite what our faith is. And that makes it a challenge to see how that faith could be expressed in our daily interactions in the world. But I think there is a place we could start. We don't have a creed, but we do have a covenant. The reframed statement of that covenant, of our shared values, places love at the center of our theology, naming 6 values we hope will shape the way we enact that theology. Rendered as a lovely piece of art, it looks like this. There's love at the center, surrounded by interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. And what if, as we UUs move through the world, we picture ourselves standing in the center of this image, maybe holding that flaming chalice with love burning at the center? Could we get ourselves in the habit, in the faithful practice of consciously entering each action and every decision from that place, viewing and guiding what we do through a lens of a spiritually disciplined love, focused through one or more of those 6 values? Could we welcome people into our homes, our workplaces, our churches, our lives, saying to ourselves, maybe even saying out loud, welcome in the name of loving generosity? Could we utter a prayerful in the name of love and equity each time we sign a contract or hand over a credit card for a big purchase? And you think to yourself, but Chad, when I buy that TV, I'm not acting in love and equity. I just want a TV. Huh? Could we remind ourselves, even in conflict, could I remind myself every time I walk into court that even in conflict, we act in the name of an intentional love shaped by justice and interdependence? I believe we can. I think we should. Now, maybe we can't do this comfortably, at least not at first, maybe not ever. Nasser wrote about 3 ways religion is expressed in the world: the traditionalist, the modernist, and the fundamentalist. When he writes about most Muslims in the world, it is traditionalist. Their religion is part of their life, but it is all of it, not picking 1 or 2 pieces and hammering those. That is the fundamentalist approach. You, like most people in Western religious traditions, tend toward the modernist view. Religion has a place in modern society. Here we are. But that place is distinct from our daily secular lives. And religion should be reformed to reflect modernization and science. What I'm proposing is that we try to adopt a traditionalist approach to Unitarian Universalism, inspired by, though certainly not identical to what Nasser depicted in traditionalist Islam. Our traditions and belief systems are obviously different. And so the ways we incorporate them into our daily lives should be honest to who we are and who we hope to be. But we hope to be a religious tradition centered in love. So maybe we could help build a traditionalist Unitarian Universalism that puts into practice a theology that not only rejects the idea of separating our religious lives from our secular, but rejects the idea that those are separate ideas to begin with. Insists that all our actions should be shaped and reformed to reflect our religious values, not the other way around. That we will live a theology centered in a spiritual discipline of love in all its messiness, all its complexity. So may it be. And may we make it so. Amen.